A chroeso, welcome to this hybrid meeting of the Licensing and Gambling Act Subcommittee on Monday, the 20th of January 2025. I'm Councillor Anthony John Richards. I will be chairing today's meeting. And just to make you aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can you please ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting? And would members, officers and attendees who are present in the chamber today please use their microphones when speaking? When not speaking, can I ask that you ensure your microphone is switched to mute? If you have any questions, please raise your hand or your electronic hand if attending virtually. So agenda item 2 are declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
I see none, Chair.
No. Okay, great. So we'll move on then to the application for the grant of a premises licence. So agenda item 3 is on pages 3 to 127 of the circulated pack. Before we do that, if we could do some introductions as well, just so that we know who everybody is. So I will start with myself. So as I've said on the recording, my name's Councillor Anthony John Richards. I'm the chair of the Licensing Committee. And then if I move to my left.
Suzanne Paddison, Councillor for Sandfields West within the authority and a member of the subcommittee.
Hi, I'm Nadine Jones and I'm Democratic Services Officer.
I'm Councillor James Henton. I'm Vice Chair of the committee.
Afternoon, everyone. Neil Chappell. I'm the Legal Regulatory Manager for the Council with responsibility for licensing.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gavin White. I'm the Legal Advisor to the subcommittee.
I'm Matthew Greenwich. I'm a lawyer within the Legal Services Department.
Hi, my name is Wayne Morris. I'm the owner of Benchmark Barn at Eglwys Neath in Margam.
Afternoon, Rob Dudley on behalf of the applicant.
Afternoon, Matthew Phipps from TLT Solicitors. I'll be presenting the application this afternoon.
Afternoon, Ollie Bartlam, event producer for In It Together Festival.
The people all behind us are our team, but just to observe the hearing. A couple haven't been to a hearing before, wanted to have a look at how it all works, that sort of thing. You're welcome to get them to introduce themselves, but they won't be speaking, I don't imagine.
Should we, I'm happy if, you don't have to do introductions then, if you're here for observation purposes. And then from home then, please. So I can see Mr. Powell, if we start with you.
Yes, Brian Powell, resident of St David's Park.
Okay, thank you.
Rupert Burton, acoustic consultant for the applicant.
Great, thank you very much. So for members then, as I said, this is agenda.
Just point out, Sarah Bartle is also in one of the legal regulatory officers, just in the public gallery for observation as well.
Great, thank you very much. So agenda item 3 is on pages 3 to 127 of the circulated report pack and is here for decision. So Mr. Chappell, would you please introduce the report?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. So this is an application for a new premises licence for Old Park Farm, Water Street, Port Talbot, Margam. The applicant being Climax Promotions and Events Limited. Members will note from the report that the proposal is to permit licensable activities on a maximum of 8 event days per calendar year. Members will be aware that there is a premises licence which is already in force for this particular premises, and that has hosted the In It Together Festival for the last 3 years, May 22, 23 and 24. The new licence application, members, more or less mirrors the existing licence in terms of the timings for alcohol sales and regular entertainment. But the purpose of this particular application generally is an increase to the capacity. Members will note that there were representations received in respect of the application. South Wales Police and the Council's legal regulatory officer being the licensing officer. They requested the inclusion of additional conditions. Both these representations have been agreed, but members will also note that there were 6 representations from residents living in the proximity of the premises. These representations, members, are set out in the report at appendices 3 to 7. Members are reminded that all 6 representations must be considered today, despite only 2 of the residents being present and prepared to make their representations at the hearing. Finally, members will note information provided by the applicant in support of the application, which is set out at Appendix 10 to 15 of the report. Recommendation today, members, is that this application be determined after considering all relevant representations. Thank you, Chair.
Great, diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much, Mr. Chappell. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Chappell in regards to the report only? No? Great, okay. So, in the accordance then with the procedure for today's meeting, there will now be an opportunity for all parties to make a statement. Once all statements have been made, there will be an opportunity for questions. So we will start with the applicant. Mr. Phipps, would you please introduce your application?
So thank you very much. So the committee has got before it the papers, which very helpfully have been paginated. So page 73, if I may, I'm going to start on, and I will take you through the pages I'd be inviting your particular attention toward. I can see you're all a little more modern than me. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I've got the paper folder in front of me on recycled paper, I might add. But if I go a bit too quick, then please just shout. So this, which I appreciate the committee will all have had the opportunity to see and go through all of the papers. What I propose to do, please, is to broadly canter you through the submissions document, making particular comments that I think are material, and then cross-referencing those to where you'll find support for that commentary or submission within the bundle of papers. So hopefully that's a helpful way to do it. I mean, the other way I could do it, I could start at page 1 and get to page 130, but we just might be here a little. Yes, I take the hint. So this is an application, as Neil has indicated, for a new license, but is to all intents and purposes a variation application. And it's a variation application to primarily attend itself to issues of capacity, which I will come back to. But it is important just to give you the context for the last 3 years. This was a new event before you in 2022, and it has been a very significant success. I appreciate the residents will have comments to make about that, but certainly from a commercial perspective, and we will say unashamedly from great majority of the local community and certainly all of the responsible authorities, it's been a success from a licensing objectives perspective. But the capacity of the premises currently is 29,999. If you don't mind, I'm going to call it 30,000 for the remainder of the presentation. And that is to include staff, artists, crew, etc. We sold out last year, and it therefore perhaps doesn't come as any surprise, and it has always been the ambition of the organisers to develop the festival. And so having sold out its ticket allocation last year, the time we say is right for us to make this application. So on page 73, you'll see reference to some supporting materials. I'll come on to those supporting materials, but just so you've heard it, there's a capability statement, that's what I've called it, an introduction to those who are involved in the organisation, promotion and delivery of the event. There's an index to the event management plan. The event management plan is effectively the protocols, procedures and policies that govern the management of these events, and is the document that is exchanged and transparently always available to both responsible authorities and indeed the whole of the Safety Advisory Group. I'm sure you're familiar with safety advisory groups, but effectively they work on your larger scale events, and they include officers that are broader than merely the responsible authorities involved in licensing. So it would include highways, ambulance service and so forth, who are not licensing responsible authorities. There's a little themes response that's been provided by effectively Mr. Dudley, but his business, which picks up some of the themes that are contained within the representations. I'll come back to that. There is last year's noise management plan. You'll appreciate in the third week of January that the 2025 noise management plan isn't to hand, but just to give you an indication as to how seriously the issues of noise are taken. And there is a 10-point plan answering some of the issues and concerns and talking about 2025 from Mr. Bartlam insofar as traffic is concerned. Fair to flag that Mr. Morris highlights, as he does, concerns about traffic effectively outside his front door and in connection with an informal pick-up and drop-off point at a local restaurant. I'll come to deal with that in specific terms in due course. He's here and I know he'll be addressing you on that in a moment. So there's some commentary at the bottom of page 73 and over onto page 74 about who you have in front of you. What I say unashamedly about that is you've got genuine expertise and experience, people who have delivered for 15 in some years, in some cases, and 20 years in other cases, I think 30 years in terms of the F1 acoustics experience as a business, delivering large-scale events. And the document, the capability statement, fleshes a bit of that out. Probably as instructive and helpful as anything is the reference to other events in which they've been involved. It's an application on its individual merits. Other events don't really count for a great deal, but fair that you understand that they do operate effectively throughout England and Wales across events of a similar, some larger, some smaller demographic. So the new license application followed the Safety Advisory Group debrief. That was held on the 26th of June, and that was then in turn followed up with minutes of the debrief. And what we say about the debrief, and there were significant volumes of officer attendees. I think 27 officers attended, 5 from outside, and the 27 naturally covering the authority, the police, ambulance service, fire service, and so forth. That was very positive. Not flawless. Nobody is pretending. It would be frankly nonsense for me to suggest that we are flawless. There were clearly areas for us to focus on and for us to improve across a range of issues and topics. It's irrelevant perhaps to today, but if I give you an example just to illustrate the point, we didn't have helicopters delivering VIPs to the site. It's a farm, so there's plenty of space this year. And that was following dialogue with Environmental Health Services after the 2023 event. It was noisy and intrusive, and we were asked to stop it. We couldn't have told you in 2023 we were perfect, but we can tell you that we were listening, we paid attention, and we made improvements. But in the debrief, there were comments, for example, from Chris Dix, the then licensing police lead, that it was the best DPS and bar service that he'd seen at events of this sort. Fire service were very grateful and way in which we accommodated them. There was positive commentary about the fact we had plainclothes SIA in order to help with drug detection so that they don't stand out in their yellow tabards and that they work well with the police and so forth. Were there areas for us to focus on? Certainly. Of course there were. But I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say it was a very positive debrief. If it wasn't, you'd have a raft of officers sitting on my right-hand side telling you not to grant a variation, which this, to all intents and purposes, is. You'll note halfway down the page on page 74 that I've said the proposed hours of operation are precisely as per the existing license. And whilst that's technically correct, I ought to just point out that one change to the application this year is that we have asked for an additional condition, which is set out on page 6 of your report, in paragraph 16. And that is that with the environmental health and licensing officer's discretion, the main stage would be allowed to stay open until 11:10. And just to explain that, last year, the main act on the main stage in their last song were effectively cut dead because we delivered to our 11 p.m. the year before, forgive me, because we delivered to our 11 p.m. cutoff. Fair to say that the artist and particularly their tour manager were not thrilled with their last song being cut off in the middle of it, but them's the rules, them's the rules. But we did reflect on that, and after dialogue with environmental health would ask for that. And I do ask you to note it's only with their permission. We're not trying to sneak an extra 10 minutes in, but cutting off the main artist in the middle of an encore is not perhaps, and I say this in all seriousness, not perhaps the best way to promote the licensing objectives, because you don't tend to particularly do anything other than alienate the artist and or the crowd. So we'd invite you to reflect on that 10-minute part, but we say it's perfectly legitimate. The capacities are then set out halfway down page 74 of the submissions. And again, they're set out on page 12 of your report, but I have effectively cut and pasted them. So I think they do mirror one another. What we're asking for this year is a capacity of 35,000. There is no attempt to try and leap from 29,999 from 30,000 to 50,000. What's proposed is that each year we have a 5,000 incremental increase. And we say that 5,000 following last year's event at 30 as a sellout is a perfectly legitimate, proportionate increase. Doesn't mean there isn't work for us to do to make sure that we're on top of it, but that's candidly true of every large-scale festival event anywhere in the country. There's an operating schedule set out within the application, but I've summarised it, I hope helpfully. It runs to 4 sides of A4 in the earlier pages of your report. But engagement with safety advisory group, preparation of an event management plan, risk assessments, site plans, fire, crowd security, drugs, alcohol, medical, welfare, noise, traffic, ingress, egress, sanitation, campsite, child welfare, etc., all to be specific policies, procedures. And that document is provided to the safety advisory group no less than 4 months prior to the event, and we're engaged in dialogue. Obviously, we're continuing events, so the dialogue is ongoing all year round, in truth. And then additional conditions about disability access, security and stewarding, CCTV, counting systems, Challenge 25, electrical certification, drinking water, waste management, a noise hotline, a noise management consultancy, monitoring, noise management plan, and so forth. I can take you through every word of the conditions, but it's fair to say that very, very broadly, they mirror the existing license. Insofar as the existing license conditions are concerned, I should also add that those are effectively signed off before the event, and there's multi-agency dialogue and discussion in advance of each event with a variety of timetables, as you'll have seen. Obviously, the rate of acceleration as we get closer to the event builds up pretty quickly, but all of the conditions effectively delivered. So following the debrief this year, we've then engaged with the officers. That's the licensing authority, particularly environmental health, and South Wales Police officers. So there's a transparent discussion about what we would like to do in advance. And in advance of the submission of the application, police and the officers engaged. A couple of suggestions for some tweaks to conditions, which I'm bound to say are pretty inconsequential. And everybody was content to see the application go forward. From the officers, we then received 2 representations. I'm going to take you to those, please. Page 25 is the first one within your pack. It technically starts on page 23, but page 23 and 24 are just repeating what's in the application. So the paragraphs that I'll just bring to your attention, please. Paragraph 3 on page 25. And I'll just read it quickly, if I may. South Wales Police, sorry, am I going too quickly, Joe?
Mr. Phipps, sorry about this, but the page number is wrong. Well, certainly when you've been referring to page 73, I think on the actual paginated document, it's page 75, for example. So can I just ask, what page are we reading again, please?
I got page 73 on the bottom of the... So shall I add two? Sometimes on a
Yes.
PDF, you might have two
Yes.
pages at the start.
Thank you.
Sorry, so page 70, you should have just interrupted me. Page 75, I meant. Forgive me. I now mean page 27. Sorry, thanks. No, thanks for telling me that. So on page 27, I'll just quickly read it because it makes the point neatly enough. South Wales Police actively encourage early engagement and consultation in order to assist applicants to work in a partnership approach. And in this case, the applicant is engaged fully and on a number of occasions to ensure they have the best information available to them when compiling the application operating schedule. Following this, they send us a draft application for consideration, following feedback from myself and other stakeholders, I think primarily environmental health, have amended the operating schedule in terms of conditions contained in the documents submitted and site plan. And then 3 paragraphs down, with the organisers actively responding to stakeholder concerns, I feel that the only fair and proportionate way to address these concerns is allow the festival organiser to deliver the plans that they've developed and demonstrate they are robust and can support the increased capacity applied for. And then over the page 28 for you, last paragraph, penultimate paragraph, I believe that the conditions they've suggested are proportionate, are in line with the type of event they hope to run, the location they have elected to use for the festival, and will help promote the licensing objectives. It would be remiss of any licensing solicitor not to point out those sort of comments from police. What you will have seen as committee members over the years is that when the police engage, they're quick to tell you about breach of conditions, attitude of management, disappointing this, upset with that, failed to deliver to this. That, candidly, having done this for a while, that's about as positive as it gets. And I will be asking you when you retire to reflect on the tone there, because it's not just the content of the 2 conditions, which are agreed, and no issue with that. The tone does tell you something as well. And then if you go, so over the page to 31 is the start of the representation from your environmental health team or the licensing authority. On to page 32, second paragraph. Before the submission of this application, there was extensive engagement between the applicants, the licensing section, with anticipation we'll be in a position where all parties agree with what's proposed. 2 paragraphs down, the back end of that paragraph. I'm aware the proposed traffic management plans have been scrutinised by the Safety Advisory Group. There have been various subgroups created with partner agencies to review what's being proposed. We entirely accept the preceding comments. We need an extensive traffic management plan, and it needs to take the learnings from this year just gone, or 2024, and we entirely accept and recognise that. And that's why I make the point in the introduction about the event safety management plan being disclosed to the officers 4 months in advance of the event, and that the ongoing dialogue with the Safety Advisory Group looks at all of these policies. 3 paragraphs from the bottom of page 32, Peter effectively says, in hindsight, I'd like to add a couple of conditions. Those develop effectively the provision of security in the estate in immediate proximity to the event site. And so those conditions are set out on page 35. And effectively, I don't think it's wrong to say that they're reasonably translated as there will be security in the residential area, clearly defined within the security management plan. And as the event develops in size and scope, the size and volume of that security provision will itself develop. And those conditions are all agreed. Just to the top of page 34, if I may, I'm making this representation to amend the conditions outlined above, as I think these changes will promote the licensing objectives and give clear direction to the premises licence holder and residents what's expected. particularly in relation to preventing crime, preventing public nuisance. And we entirely accept those conditions and have been happy with the engagement that we've had. So I'm sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'll jump you back then, please, to page 78 of your papers. So we say, third paragraph, just quoting the national guidance, we say unashamedly that the lack of representations today from any of the responsible authorities is a very significant point, and that the two officers who engage specifically say that the conditions that have been agreed and proposed within the application will promote the licensing objective. Something to be reflected on, please. But as the guidance makes clear, they are generally considered to be your experts in the field. So, well, you can read the paragraph for yourself, but if the two primary officers involved have effectively commended the application, and to some fairly significant extent the applicant as well, I'll be asking you to weigh that in the balance in due course. In terms of the residential representations, we're very respectful of the fact that there are objections. It's fair to say it's very rarely the case for an event of this size that you wouldn't expect to see some objection. What I would ask you just to reflect on, though, is despite the articulate and considered way in which those representations have been put, it wouldn't be fair to suggest that the community is opposed. You can see the map plan, you'll know the area yourself, you know the volume of residential within the estate and indeed in neighbouring surrounding areas. 6 representations, perfectly valid, legitimate, and certainly to be considered by you, but it isn't a great deal in the scheme of the residential that's nearby. And I should say that over and above the obligations to display the notices for the application around the perimeter of the site, which the applicants did, I haven't counted the number of notices, but a significant volume of notices around the applicant's site. There were 21 notices displayed in effectively the streets around the estate. So that, and to be fair, the representations say that. It was, I won't quote it to you, but one of the representations said, oh, I saw the notice in the street and I'm writing it to you. So this hasn't been, I don't think it's been suggested, but this hasn't been missed by anyone either. And nor could it fairly have been said to have been missed, not just because of compliance with the law, but actually they have gone over and above. Some of the representations, or one certainly I think, touches on the issue of tranquility. I'm not here to be aggravating to the residents, but I'm afraid tranquility is not a licensing objective. The prevention of public nuisance is the licensing objective. And so I can't help with tranquility. It would be simply false for me to suggest that there will not be any impact at all when you have an event of this size. Just as if you have the Grand Prix, just as if you have a rugby match, just as if you have a football match. It's just the nature of large volumes of people coming and going. Our job is to ensure that we minimise that disruption and impact. And that, I hope, the Event Safety Management Plan Index clearly sets out we do. And that's why we have the engagement of the officers, who, probably a bit harsh to say they hold our feet to the fire, but they hold our feet to the fire when they need to. A couple of the representations include a noise guidance document from Belfast City Council. You may have had the chance to look through it. I'm not here to argue with its contents, and the broad principles I don't really have any issue with, but we're not in Belfast. It's the Neath and Talbot licensing policy and the attendant various policies that are of significance. It's a completely different legislative format over the water. I'm not even qualified to speak about Northern Irish law, so I can't really offer you much on it, but you might consider it informative. But if what's being said is please be considerate of your neighbours when you are hosting the event. Yes, that challenge is entirely accepted. Can I talk to what they do in Belfast and say, oh, that's what they should do in Neath or Talbot? No. In terms of noise management, we take the noise management very seriously. We have the noise management plan, which I'm going to show a couple of points on. But there was a noise management plan debrief. That's a specific condition. We have to engage with environmental health. We have to provide them with our statistical empirical evidence. We have to show that the noise levels were below the agreed noise levels, which they were. We did have noise issues of management, and they were not attributable to the volumes of music played and all of our monitoring equipment, and that's both mobile and static. The couple of positions within the estate where we have constant noise monitoring equipment set up, and where we also have 3 acousticians on site and off site, always in touch with the various stages, doing analysis around and about. Rain, the camper van field needs more careful management next year, no challenge to that. Vehicles did cause late night noise, and we've touched on the vehicle issue. But what I can say is we had no complaints to the residential community hotline number at all, insofar as noise, at all. Doesn't mean we didn't have any complaints. There's engagement, and Mr. Morris is going to tell you about his issues in due course, but we didn't have any noise complaints at all. Then over on to page 79, just insofar as traffic is concerned, let's just do the issue that Mr. Morris has fairly brought to your attention. We have a pick-up and drop-off, a PUDO as it's colloquially known, at the Purple Gate, effectively top of the site. And that works pretty well, and has worked certainly well in 2022 and 2023. What happened in 2024 is that an unofficial, not inexplicable, but certainly we had no prior anticipation of it occurring, PUDO was generated effectively outside the Grand Sultan restaurant, which caused the photos that you can later see. And we had our tickets provide for campers, provide for people to have weekend tickets who live locally who are allowed to come and go. And we also sell day tickets where people might come for one day or more. So we do have this year, we had more taxis, and we had more, sometimes parents, sometimes friends, picking up and dropping off. This caused a problem for which we can only apologise. And it'll be rightly said of us that we need to manage this more carefully next year. We need to have more resource directed at the space. We need to look at marshalling. We need to look at better signage. We need to look at better engagement with the restaurant, with whom we're already in a dialogue. We need to look at better obstructions to stop people. I mean, you'll understand it's a restaurant, so we've got to walk fairly carefully about not spoiling their business. But we've got to manage that space better. We've got to have better engagement with the taxi businesses to explain that they're not to treat that as a quick getaway space. And we also, are going to be putting our minds to that with the officers in the safety advisory and accepting, working with them, advice that we may be provided. But traffic more generally, which is page 129 of the report, which is the last 2 pages, Mr. Bartlam's just pulled together sort of 10 bullet points to just highlight things that we're looking at. What that essentially boils down to, and this is a slightly crude way of articulating it, is that we're going to double the rate at which cars can be managed by having, in its simplest form, 2 exit routes rather than 1. So although we are going up by 5,000, the actual roads will see a reduction. Well, the one road will see a reduction. The other, it's fair to say, will see an increase. So we do believe that we can deliver to a more satisfactory standard next year. And obviously we take some comfort from the fact that the officers appear to agree with that. And I do make the point there on page 79, that the way in which I'd invite you to think about the Safety Advisory Group is that they're a secondary lockstep, really. The grant of the license is the hearing in front of you today, but we don't just get to sail off and then go and open tomorrow morning. You know, if you license a pub or something, they open the following day if, you know, building works have been finished and it's safe and secure. There's an awful lot of dialogue, discussion, meetings and so forth that will be continuing across the next several months on this, and that will include all of the topics we've covered. I've quoted you some paragraphs about the national guidance, page 79, and I hope not too patronisingly, I've quoted you your own licensing policy through the bottom of page 79 and through most of page 80. All those paragraphs will be known to you. I'm not going to repeat them, but what I do say is that we fall squarely within all of the aspirations culturally, all of the aspirations from a pre-application engagement perspective, and particular points that you highlight as meriting special considerations: risk assessment, staff, CCTV, drugs, alcohol, management policies are all contained within our documents. So bottom of page 80, I just make a point about risk. Granting this application is not without risk. We can't appear in front of you with guarantees. That just isn't the nature of any licensing application. If we were only going to grant licensing applications for variation or indeed for new licenses without there being any risk, you'd never grant anything. But what I think you can do is look at how we have performed over the last 3 years. And as I hope I've fairly said all the way through, not without room for improvement, not without learnings to be taken into the following year, but not so modest that you would have 8 responsible authorities here saying, over my dead body, please don't grant this, they're hopeless. So then, as I said, there's a capability statement at page 83. I'll leave you to have a little bit of a look at that. It does have some environmental and sustainable credentials, just to touch on that, because that's within your licensing policy and a key consideration for councillors. Page 76 is just the index of the event safety management plan with the appendices on page 97. The response document touching on noise pollution, antisocial behaviour, traffic, produced by Mr. Dudley, page 99. Noise management plan, just a couple of points that's set out on page 101, but just a couple of points that I just bring to your attention, if I may. The page 114, pre-event information, sound propagation tests, and so forth are all undertaken last year, as they will be this. Page 116, just a bit about the monitoring, proposed positions agreed with environmental health, off-site monitoring kit. Paragraph 4.2.11, measured continuously. Over to page 117, regular visits by the team. 4.2.14, page 17, lead consultant and the officers responsible attend daily meetings on each day of the event. Page 118, 4.2.21, community hotline and response to complaints, car park and camping areas, and then 4.2.6 on page 119, post-event report, which I hope fairly indicates the engagement that is transparent and ongoing. And then page 129, I'm not going to take you through all of Mr. Bartlam's various points, but you'll, I hope, see that we are learning and that we are listening, and that we seriously believe that the licensing objectives will be promoted by this application if granted. I've taken a bit longer perhaps than any of us hoped or thought, but it's a significant application for the event, so they're at a crossroads, and so we would invite you to grant it, and obviously in due course you may have some questions.
Thank you very much. What we'll do now is I'll now ask those residents that have submitted representations in respect of the application to make any statements that they wish to make. Please remember at this stage no questions are to be asked. So if we start with yourself in the chamber.
My name is Wayne Morris. I own and reside at Benchmark Barn, Eglwys, Neath. Thank you for allowing me to come today. My attendance here probably shows how important I take this. My property backs on to Water Street and takes the brunt of the consequential impact arising from the festival. I've had the documentation through on Friday afternoon, so I've had very limited time to go through it. I've made some copious notes, which I'll raise with you today. I've listened to Mr. Phipps, and I've now realised who the gentleman to the side is, Ollie Barton, which I'll come to the relevance of that in a second. Firstly, I want to make it very clear to everybody concerned today that I'm not a person who is against the festival. I can see the benefits that's afforded by the festival. It not only brings enjoyment, but it brings commercial economic benefit to Margam. But to me, it raises the profile of Margam and the area. So I'm not here as a person, no, I don't want people to have fun. I'm not. I'm here as a resident. But furthermore, my background, I'm a chartered civil engineer, I'm a chartered surveyor. I'm a streetworks licensed practitioner. I've got 30 years in construction. I deal with huge construction projects. My business looks after HS2, looks after various big projects, and I deal with it on a day-to-day basis. So I'm here as somebody who has been trained in health and safety, who's been trained in traffic management, in construction. It's instilled into him on a daily basis. And I'm here because I do not want to see anybody getting hurt. And the practices that I've seen in 2024 certainly is not the case. They are not fit for purpose in respect of health and safety and dealing with the consequential impact that's on the residents. So my point, there has to be a balance, okay? And in regards to the festival, and I can see the benefits of the way that you're looking to improve the festival and everything else, but you also have to take into consideration the impact that you're putting onto the immediate community. And you are not. And I've got evidence, which I will prove to you in a second, that you are not taking that into consideration. So, Mr. Phipps, you're very eloquent in your approach, but I think you're misguided on one or 2 points in respect of the way that the festival is being run, is in respect of dealing with the complaints from the local community. So, firstly, and apologies, I don't want to be long-winded with this, but firstly, I'm not an expert when it comes to licensing. I deal with construction. So construction law is my background, but not this. So I don't understand, and I'll be the first to hold my hand up, I don't understand the intricacies of licensing. But what I will say to you is you notice that, yes, you put on every lamppost. Firstly, there's ambiguity in it, but there's lack of transparency in it. Now, rightly told earlier when I asked the question, does it have to contain all the relevant events? And I was told no. But if it did contain all the relevant events and all what you plan and propose, there'd be more than 6 people sat here from Eglwys Neath and St David's Park, let me tell you. So firstly, I'm saying there's a lack of transparency. And the lack of transparency is in a couple of points. Firstly, with regards to the times, the clarifications of the times, the new application is going to ask for continuous opening from 10 on the Thursday right through to 4 p.m. on the Tuesday. Totally different to what was in the existing conditions. Okay, so there's that, for instance. Forget about everything else that you've put in the notice because it's totally irrelevant. There are some ambiguities, but there's no point going down that. However, the big point is capacity. And you are asking for a huge hike in capacity in an area that most would say is not deemed to carry that footfall or traffic. I mean, I've just done a few figures myself over the weekend, and you're going to increase by 30,000 people. That's 150% since 2022, 150%. You know, even if you just look at certain, I mean, I don't know what your modeling has been done with the traffic, but to me, you're going to increase in 2028, right? If you just take basic models into consideration, you're going to increase vehicle movements per day by 95%. 95%. You can't cope with it now. So how are you going to cope with 95% increase? And that's not basic modeling. So there's lots of issues there. Firstly, I'm annoyed at the lack of transparency on the noticing. And as I say, there would have been a lot more people here. But secondly, you're asking that we have to accommodate you open 24 hours and all this, the associated that goes with that. There was other things I wanted to discuss on alcohol, but the gentleman put me straight on that, so that's fine. So that's the first point, is ambiguity and lack of transparency. But then when we get into start looking through the documentation, the police report, I take on board the police report. I had to call the police out 5 times. 5 times. Not because I'm a busybody, it's because I do not want somebody to get hurt. I am passionate that I do not want somebody to get hurt. And we will come on in a second of how the festival failed to deal with that. But let's look at the statements within the police report. The one remaining unknown about the proposed increase in capacity is how this will impact the local area and the site itself in terms of traffic and ticket holders attending the event due to local geography and road network. How do they conclude this? The organisers have engaged and responded by adapting their plans to address the concerns raised, including altering the site layout and the traffic management plan. But in truth, this is the best bit, talk about horse and the stable gate. The only definitive proof will be when the traffic management plans are put into practice during a live event. So what are we? Somebody that you're going to have, we have to deal with the consequences associated with it. I mean, I was refreshed when I read the legal regulatory report, Appendix 2, but when it talked about the security were gone in Eglwys Neath at 7 p.m. They were gone. They were not there during the critical periods. They were gone. Every day, gone. And I know that because I allowed them to use my premises because they didn't have provision for toilets or anything else. They were gone at 7 o'clock. I can also say to you as well, why? Because I put reports into Neath Talbot Council as well as the police, everybody. Why is it that nobody has now picked up and spoke to the taxi and minibus companies? They were clearly identified. I spoke to them. They told me categorically that the traffic management plan was not fit for purpose and that if they used the entrance that was on Water Street to go and pick people up and drop people off, that they would only maybe do 1 or 2 journeys a day. Doing what they're doing, they can get 9 or 10 in. Commercially, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? So let's talk about Water Street. We've had a death on Water Street. We had accidents on Water Street. Coming out of the festival on Water Street, there's a footpath. That footpath takes you up on the opposite side of the road to Eglwys Neath. From Eglwys Neath to St David's, there's no footpath. From where that footpath terminates outside the Sultan, all the way up through Water Street, there is no footpath, nothing whatsoever. So now, this is easy, it can be picked up by anybody. I draw your attention to this document. This is a report from a gentleman called David W. Griffiths, who's Head of Engineering and Transport for Neath Talbot Council, 24th of September. This is a report anybody can pick up. Can I just say the relevance of it?
Mr. Morris, can I just ask, in respect to licensing hearings like this one, usually people have to be given notice of the documents with which they're going to submit. Unfortunately, if you want to submit that now, unless you get the consent of the applicant, that's going to be very difficult to have.
Well, all I'll say to you is I didn't get any of the documentation to read about capacity and everything else until late on Friday. I've had to look through it on the weekend. This is a public document that is open to anybody to read that clearly states Water Street is one of the most critical streets due to the changes that's been done to it by the local authority by allowing HGV traffic no longer to go through Pyle but to come down through Water Street. It also clearly states that it's a danger to pedestrians because there's no footpaths. And more importantly, it states 85% of the traffic that versus Water Street are in excess of 56 miles an hour. It is very relevant.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. what I would say is you said that you didn't receive the documents. And apologies, Chair. I appreciate a breaking the procedure here. Do you mind if I just ask a few questions? Thank you. You received the documents you said on Friday. This is a question to the Democratic Officer and Mr. Chappell. What date were the documents published publicly, please?
Wednesday, Chair.
Thank you. So they were available for inspection by the public last Wednesday. Okay, thank you.
Then we're not given any notice or whatever. I mean, we are just residents. We are not here, looking for every notice. I've come here, as explained.
I appreciate that.
Safety.
I appreciate that, Mr. Morris. It's just we have to ensure the integrity of the hearing and to make sure that everyone has a fair hearing effectively.
Then I've had to listen to various aspects that's just been mentioned here that I have not been party to. So again, I can only discuss on where I am, and I'm putting up a defence on why I believe the traffic management was not fit for purpose. And that document is one of several that's relevant. I'm sorry to say it's relevant and it's open to anybody. So anybody who is legitimate in doing traffic management plans would investigate what's happened previously. This paper on Appendix 15 doesn't breeze any considerations to what's happened.
Mr. Morris, the documents, a number of the documents you have in front of you, they've been released for a number of days now. The document that you're trying to submit is a document that you've only brought up at this hearing. I certainly wasn't aware of it as a legal advisor, and I suspect neither was the committee, neither was the applicants.
But then again, I was not party to being told about the documentation. It's only what came to me on Friday. So it's a flip, isn't it, in return? This is open to anybody to review. Anybody who is got worth the assault when it comes to dealing with traffic management, but more importantly, dealing.
Sorry, if I can just come in terms of this case, the legal advice is that anything that is that's been submitted in the pack for members to decide is the information that we go off today. Anything additional, unless is agreed by the applicant, then we will not be discussing.
Well,
so no, sorry. Until we have found out, I've taken the legal advice, until we have asked the applicant whether or not you can discuss that document, it has not been provided into the pack, and therefore we cannot take that into consideration. But I'm happy for them, to confer and to ask the question. Sorry. Until we get that information, we are not taking any further information with regards to reports that have been submitted unless we go through the correct legal channels, because we as people who are going to be making decisions cannot go off information unless, other than what is in the pack, unless, as has been legally stated, that we have that agreement. So we do need to stick to that. I do take your point. So is the document that you have mentioned, is that something that you would like us to request to the applicants if you can bring forward to this meeting?
I think it's very relevant.
Okay. So if we can take legal advice on that.
No, Mr. Morris, please stop. Before we ask the applicant whether or not they are happy to consider the documentation, we need to know at the start, are there any other documents now that you also wish to submit? Because I don't want to do this each time.
Yes, I can turn around and I can give you, well, the copies of the letters that I sent to Neath Talbot, the complaints letters, you've already had. Now, whether it's been passed on to the legal committee, I don't know, but you've had them. There's letters that I wrote to the In It Together Festival, as well, which I've had no responses to. They can be admitted. And secondly, I have transcripts of the WhatsApp text messages to Mr. Barton, where I was putting in complaints and asking him to act due to the issues that were going on. So there's several if you wish to bring into consideration, and I've got copies here for you.
So thank you for that. And if, we will refer to the legal officer with regards to what you've just said. So thank you.
I don't want to interrupt, but before your legal officer provides advice or makes a, or you make later make a, I would like to address the committee. I'd just flag it for now. Sorry.
Thank you. I just had to check that. I had to read the documents just to make sure. Obviously, when you submitted your original representation, obviously, I presume that the documents you're talking about were not submitted at that time. What you're saying is they're historical documents, which, yes, so they weren't submitted with your representation.
No.
No. The only thing that you've submitted is effectively one letter, and which is, I think, is at Appendix 7, and then a number and a collection of several photographs at Appendix 8. That's correct, isn't it? Yeah. So on that basis, you would certainly need the permission. If you did want to submit those, you'd need the permission of the applicant. The applicant is not compelled in any way to accept it. And those documents, even if you did and they were accepted, I would probably suggest, Chair, in that event, that there'd need to be a short adjournment, depending on the quantity of the papers, for everyone to read them.
But what I will say to you, there are 1 or 2 points that I have, especially with regards to the failure to respond to written complaints, to respond to telephone complaints, that I think are relevant, because ultimately it goes to show that complaints are not being taken seriously.
You're allowed to amplify on any sort of representations you've made to need, but what you're not allowed to do is include extra additional points to that.
Well, to be honest, the text messaging that's on WhatsApp, probably Mr. Barton has still got on his phone. So. Yeah, but
I think that might be the case. Maybe, maybe not, Mr. Morris. But ultimately, the purpose of the subcommittee today, it has to follow the correct procedure. So if you can just confirm which documents you want to consider for the applicant, whether or not they grant them. If you can just list them, that would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
I mean, it's all to do with what they've already received from me anyway, so. Yeah, I know, I appreciate where you're going. I'm trying to explain, that's all.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Marsh, and I appreciate your earlier comment where you said you weren't au fait with the licensing procedure and things like that. Unfortunately, it appears that some of the documentation that you probably want to submit, which you claim has already been submitted to the local authority and to the applicants, because that's historic, and the only thing really that the local authority, the subcommittee can really rely on at the minute is Appendix 7 and Appendix 8 by you. Okay?
I can still talk in general terms.
As long as you're amplifying on points which you've already made, as long as, but remember, please remember, there is a boundary and perimeter to that.
That's fine, and thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome, Mr. Morris.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah, so from this basis, the question is, going back to the original question, is this information that you would like, that you are requesting that we become aware of, and therefore we would need the permission of the applicant, and please correct me, the legal officer, if I'm incorrect here, and then what we would, and if you told us the information that you would want us to see, if they, for example, hypothetically were to accept that, we would have a short adjournment so that we could get copies and we would have time to be able to read that information. For the members who are making the decision, are reading the points that have been submitted in the pack, and therefore we cannot take any additional information unless, you know, we have that time to be able to digest that information.
I think it's relevant that the report from Neath Talbot Council regarding Water Street is looked at. It's very relevant. And I also believe that the failure to respond to my complaints via WhatsApp and via email and written demonstrates that there's failure in the current conditions, that they're not complying with the current conditions. So, as I said to you before, I've come here looking in some respects for a compromise that we can all work together.
So those are the bits of information that you were requesting to be brought forward. Yes. Okay, so Mr. White, what's the procedure now with regards to going forward on this?
First of all, Mr. Phipps, do you have any comment in respect to that?
Thank you. So I can take this pretty straightforwardly, if I may, but it's important before I give you effectively an answer to the question, really, which is, do you consent? I just explain, if I may, a couple of things. This hearing is listed for 2 o'clock today, and it's been listed for a month or more. And the application was made, forgive me, I'll get the date wrong, I think the end of October. And the representations were served beginning of November. And your licensing team circulate your procedure and the various protocols and the way in which these things are to be considered. I mean, I'm going to say weeks ago, certainly before Christmas, presuming, as I am, that everybody who's a party to the proceedings get everything that I'm sent. The papers that we send in, we sent across to you a week last Friday. And so I'm just making that point because I am aggrieved by the lack of transparency point, because this is not fairly attributable to this job. 10 days. I know licensing solicitors are prone to sending papers in at 5 to 5 on a Friday before a 9 o'clock Monday morning hearing. I know, I'm not pretending that's never happened. It has not happened on this job, and it is not fairly attributable to this. That's point one. Point two is that the reference to all of this material didn't even start, respectfully, Mr. Morris, until after I'd finished my presentation. It wasn't at 5 to 2, oh, I need to have a quick word, you need to see this or you need to see that. And then I might have asked you for 10 minutes and can I read it and can I see it? So I've finished my entire case, which we know took 45 minutes. And I'm afraid this is the definition of being blindsided. And so if we then just look at what the materials are, there's reference, I think it's a transport report. I forgive me for this. I just did literally miss it because I was making some notes about something else, but reference to a transport report or a road report about Water Street. We won't be accepting that, I'm afraid. That's brand new, out of the blue. And I'm afraid that does not, as far as I can see, in any way fall within the parameters that your legal officer has quite correctly pointed out. You can only develop that which is in your representation. So if you say, my concern is crime and disorder, you can't suddenly say, oh, but today it's not about crime and disorder because I've read your papers and I sort of accept that you've dealt with that. Now I want it to be about something else. So just to be clear as to the resistance to that, and I'm going to make the point in closing, but I'm afraid I'm going to make it now. If this was a legitimate issue, you'd rather wonder where the police and highways were, but that's perhaps a point for my closing speech. In terms of the other documents, was there a WhatsApp engagement with Mr. Bartlam? Yes, I know that to be true because I'm familiar with it. I can't quote it to you, but in the 3 months we've been preparing for today, we've had that conversation, and I remember that I've seen some of those messages. And there's a couple of voice messages with the parties engaging. That's true, and there's no suggestion that's not true. Am I planning and do I consent to everybody sending their phones into the council and democratic services to extrapolate a load of WhatsApp messages? No, I'm really sorry. I can't. The way in which large-scale events work in terms of the officer and applicant engagement is time is the killer. You've got to have time to have safety advisory group meetings, subsector meetings, debrief meetings and so forth. I can't, I'm afraid, agree to effectively an adjournment. And it's not, based on what we're talking about, it's not an adjournment for have a coffee and see you in half an hour. It's see you in 3 weeks. So I can't agree to the WhatsApp. In terms of letters that have been sent, and forgive me, I wasn't sure whether it's been sent to you or to the police, like you, the council, or to the police or to us. None of those letters are in front of us. The ones that we've been sent, I'm not denying they were sent. I can tell you I've not seen them. And so I'm afraid I can't agree to that. And if it's letters that were sent to you or the police, and I do accept that there's, I wrote to both Neath and Talbot council as well as my local MP, Stephen Kinnock, who totally ignored my concerns. I accept that said in the representation, so that does amplify a point that's fairly made. But I'm afraid a letter sent to Stephen Kinnock MP is no concern of the licensing committee. I can't help you with that. And whether Mr. Kinnock ignored it or not, I mean, I can't speak for Mr. Kinnock. So I can't agree to that. And then the last thing is that there were complaints made to the organisers. I'm guessing that's touching on the WhatsApp, or perhaps that's the engagement or dialogue with the security staff, whatever. I accept that Mr. Morris made complaints. I'm not in any position to challenge that. I hope I never suggested that point from his representation wasn't fairly made in the representation. But the detail of that, or letters that have gone to the MP or whoever, or you, I don't know if it's Neil or legal or whoever, I'm afraid we're way past the point at which I can agree to an adjournment for that. So the reason I've explained it for so long is that from an applicant's perspective, saying no to residents is pretty unattractive. From a committee's perspective, it's unattractive for the resourced applicant to say no. So I'm sorry I've given you a 5-minute ramble, but the answer to the straight question from your legal officer is no. We don't consent. And I'm bound to make this final point. The amplification of the points contained within the representation point is important. I do not want to interrupt Mr. Morris again, and I will do my damnedest not to. But I was making notes to myself during the course of Mr. Morris's introductory comments and I would have said this in my closing, but I will be asking you to discount all the points he's made that are not fairly set out in the representation. That's being blindsided in the most classical sense, of which, respectfully, there was quite a bit. But it's so unattractive for a solicitor to interrupt a resident, I decided
you will have an opportunity to ask questions to the resident as well. So yes. we will come on to that. So I will stop you there. So just for clarification, the applicants have are not allowing for that for that information to come forward, and therefore we will proceed without making reference to that information going forward. Is that correct from a legal standpoint?
Sorry, that's me.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. So unfortunately, Mr. Morris, the documents which you've requested to be submitted will not be submitted to the subcommittee.
Okay, I stand corrected, but again, morally, I think the notice should have been clearer, but there we are. Okay, some of my own points. South Wales Police have put safety cameras in on Water Street due to the speed of traffic. Again, that's open to anybody. But what I will say, anybody doing a traffic management plan, there's no footpaths. There is nothing. So you've got, I'm trying to be careful what I say, but when somebody has been informed that an issue has arisen, surely you would look at it and you would try to address those issues. Don't forget, you've got people who are intoxicated, having to walk on public highway. They're on a public highway, intoxicated. You've got all common sense out of the window with the motorists. You've got people, the HGVs, just banging on their horns because they're trying to get past. You've got people going on the verges. The photographs which you've had clearly show people driving along the verges, trying to get past. Again, I'm just coming back to the point I made to start with. I'm here because of safety. Safety is paramount. What I will say as well is, God forbid somebody got knocked down, or God forbid somebody in St David's or Eglwys Neath had a requirement for an emergency service, because I cannot foresee how they would have got through that chaos. Cannot foresee. So that is immensely important. And again, the photographs that I have sent through to you in a timely manner, I think they're irrefutable. It's irrefutable proof the chaos that was going on. And as I say, I'm here because I don't want it to happen again. And referring back to a letter that was written to the festival organisers, okay, I won't go into it. I offered to say, can I meet you and we share best practice? The words I said, quite clear. Please, can we meet and discuss best practice? And it was gone. So
we will not be accepting any information that has not been brought forward to the case. So I will ask. Sorry, no. Why? Sorry, I'm sorry.
I'll conclude.
Sorry, no. Absolutely, we want to give you fair representation, and I really don't want to this to seem as though this is an attack in any way. I have to stand firm here. We have taken legal advice, and therefore the fact that I am given this intervention is the fact that we've gone through this, and it is really important that we stick to the guidelines of this committee. But absolutely, we are more than happy for you to go through all of the information, and you are bringing up points. And that is really important to us. So I don't want to stifle, anything that you have to add, but it does have to stay with what you have sent, because you didn't send that information as part of this application. So, diolch.
If I was somebody who was afraid with the regulations, then you would have probably had a 400-page document come through to you. But again, I only had this on Friday. I've had to look at it on the weekend. And these are just my comments. But all I'm going to say is safety is paramount. That's all I'm asking for. I do not want people using my property as a urinal. I do not want people driving over my property. I don't want people throwing road cones onto my car and into the back of the house. I don't want people at 4 o'clock in the morning banging on my gates and everything that goes with it. I'm sorry. I know it's consequential. I know that you're going to have these issues with the festival, but it has to be managed. It has to be managed appropriately. And as I say, I'm here specifically for safety. That's all I'm asking for. The Appendix 15 that I've read, I think there's only 6 points on there. That's totally relevant. If so, the rest of it is waffle. All I'm asking is for common sense and for the panel to please listen. There's got to be a compromise. I'm always one for a compromise. There's got to be a compromise. And in this case, most certainly so, because I do not want to come back to you next year and somebody then will say, sorry, but there was X fatalities or whatever. Let's stop that now. Thank you for your time. And thank you again for the clarification.
Yeah, no, thank you. We have got another resident. Just to explain, before I move on to Mr. Powell, if Mr. Powell wants to make representations. Once we have heard from the residents, just to make everybody aware, what we will do then is we will go to questions. Once we go to questions, we will be bringing in the legal regulatory manager, Mr. Chappell. We will then bring in the applicant to ask any questions. The residents, you will get another opportunity to ask questions. And then the committee members will, and then lastly, the legal officer. So just to explain what the procedure will be once we have heard from Mr. Powell. So I hope that sort of clarifies everything. And Mr. Powell, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. First of all, I think Mr. Morris has said everything eloquently and more passionately than I ever could regarding the traffic management, and that is probably the most concern of the residents of St David's Park. I think it was a bit of chaos last year getting into the festival, which I know isn't the fault of the festival, where the motorway was shut on a Thursday, and that was unfortunate. But I think the traffic in and out of the festival at the peak times does need to be looked at and ensured that it is safe and reasonable. And I think Mr. Morris is quite right there, and we support him on that.
Great, thank you very much. So now that we've heard a statement from all parties, we'll now move on to questions. As I mentioned, each party will have an opportunity to ask questions of any other party. So you can ask questions of anybody else. And we will start with the legal regulatory manager, Mr. Chappell. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Chair. Only a few questions, actually, from me to the applicant first. Mr. Morris mentioned that one of the changes identified in the application was that the opening hours have changed. I've noticed that they're different from the existing license, 24-hour opening rather than specific to the timings of the alcohol. Was there any particular reason for the change? And I understand that it's not going to affect the licensable activities. I'm just wondering why that was.
Gibby, do you mean the opening hours or the licensable activities?
No, it's just relating to the opening hours.
Oh, sorry. Yes. No, you're absolutely right. People will arrive on site who might well stay there for 4 days. So, candidly, the proper way to draft the application is the way that it's drafted before. No criticism of the previous license or the previous considerations, but this is the right way to draft it. If you arrive on Thursday and you don't leave till Monday, the site needs to be open between Thursday and Monday.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Avoidance of that, as they were last year. It's just that you wouldn't have read it necessarily from the license in that way.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that point for Mr. Morris's benefit. Yeah. Okay. And then you obviously there's an existing license in effect. I haven't read anywhere, but I'm assuming that should this license be granted, the existing license will be surrendered. So there will be 2 licenses in effect, which could actually allow you to operate at different times of the year.
Yes, that's absolutely fair. There are 2 parts to my answer. One is yes, because it doesn't really suit anybody to have 2 licenses in circumstances you want to have clarity as to which one's being operated. And secondly, I'll spare your blushes with the actual figures. If you knew how much an application cost for an event of £50,000, you'd know that you wouldn't want 2 sets of annual fees arriving when you're only operating under 1 license. So commercially, it would be madness to have 2 licenses.
Yep, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. And can I just ask to Mr. Morris, if I can, you said that you're not against the festival being there. You said the benefits of it. You talked about your experience and your experience in traffic management. Can I just ask, looking at from where you live, if there was something that you particularly wanted or thought would work, is there anything that jumps to mind?
Sorry, just a reminder for the microphone, they can't hear you.
Yeah, just go. I've already made an offer to applicant to share best practice. And I would suggest that Mr. Phipps goes back to his client and ask them to furnish him with that letter. Yes, I've got extensive experience. I can see what was going on, and in my pleas I was making to the festival organizer, and I'm directing that and Mr. Barton, safety was paramount. It was crazy, honestly. I just cannot put in words really how you could describe it. Even the police were appalled. I had full police out. I said that, you know, but all I'm saying is, yes, I've got extensive experience, and I'm happy to sit down and go through point by point. In fact, I would be grateful if we could do that. And as I say, that could be one way of a compromise in some respects.
Okay, yeah. I think my question was more around the practical, because obviously what they've suggested.
There's a practical, yeah. We just get one of the local businesses. We get border barriers right away up through Water Street. That way, then we prevent it. Because I'll be truthful with you, for the 2025 concert, I am looking at putting up Harris fence in to protect my property. I'm going to have to go to that extent, which is ridiculous.
Does there's been an agreement of one of the conditions that there'll be security this year as a condition of license placed at the Eglwys and Neath and St David's Park sites. Does that offer any comfort to you in any way?
They parked on the within the confines of Eglwys and Neath, and as I say, I was making the chap coffee and allowing him to use conveniences and different things. He's gone by 7 o'clock. What is the point? That by 7 o'clock, we've got chaos erupting, and then when they're all coming out of the festival, then yes. So in reality, having security there is fantastic, but the timings are just totally impractical. They're meaningless.
Yeah, I think the agreement that they've come to is that the security will be a condition of license, and they would have to be there for the entirety of the event. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the agreement.
It's not currently a condition. If you're minded to grant the license, it will become one, and it's 24 hours a day.
But I would say then, again, one thing I would ask you guys is that a condition of the license is that appropriate, qualified and experienced traffic marshals are put throughout Water Street to prevent what I've shown you. I'm trying to give a compromise here. You know, I mean, with all due respect, this is a commercial operation to these guys. I am a resident of Neath, Port Talbot. I live here. I pay all my taxes here. I do not want my house destroyed, which is what I'm having to deal with antisocial behaviour that's arising from it. So what I'm saying is I'm here with an olive branch more than anything else. And I'm hoping that, you know, the organisers will be open to a discussion and a way forward. But I believe you need traffic marshals on there. If this was a construction site, there would be traffic marshals per se, and there would be barriers. You have to, the first point of safety is that you have to segregate pedestrians from traffic. It is the most common sense approach. There is no footpaths. You are directing people, albeit it's not an authorized stop point, but it's known that it's being used. So to me, the best practice from 2024 now has to take priority. They must take on board that there's an issue and act on it. And the first point of safety you have with the traffic marshal, with the traffic point, is that you segregate pedestrians and traffic. There is no footpath. They are directed onto the road.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. And then just to the applicant again, the highway plan is going to be developed with these sort of issues in mind.
Yeah. I mean, in reality, I think the first draft is with the Highways and the South Wales Police already, actually, and if not the entire safety advisory group. The points that Mr. Morris makes are good points. No one is here, and no part of what I'll be saying to you for the rest of the afternoon is that the pedestrian vehicle separation is wrong or that the best practice shouldn't be used or anything like that. And that's how we operate our pick up and drop off. This was a restaurant car park that popped up because informally out of the blue without warning, it started operating in that way. The points Mr. Morris makes about using best practice, learnings, getting marshals out, making sure that you've got, whether it's signage, they're all accepted. I mean, I hope I rather made that point in everything I said at the outset. I'm not challenging any of that, but to be clear, our formal pick up and drop off spot, which I grant you is further up and further away, worked really well. And everybody says it worked really well. It was the informality of this being somebody's cute idea that was no part of our organisation or our operations whatsoever. Now that we know about it, for us to make sure it doesn't happen again, I entirely accept that responsibility. But there's a limit, respectfully, to the idea that our entire operation can be suggested as being amateur hour because this happened. That we resist firmly.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great. So now questions from the applicant.
Thanks very much. I think we've heard enough from me this afternoon.
Thank you very much. From the residents, so we'll start with Mr. Morris.
I repeat it, and I'm sick of hearing my own voice. I'm here, I want to compromise, I just want safety. I want the festival and the residents to work in harmony. We own our properties, we live there day in, day out. Festival is a passing couple of days.
We will take summaries a little bit later, but it's just a question. Any questions? You know, is there a question that you want to ask the applicant? You know, any specific questions? And the same for Mr. Powell. I can see Mr. Powell's got their hand raised.
Competency is, I understand, is full fat 360. That's dealing with the traffic management. What is their experience and competency on traffic management? Because I looked at the website and it mentions nothing.
So got a traffic management consultancy business who do our traffic management plan. They're called The Last Mile. They served a 55-page traffic management plan, which I'm hoping the committee will be relieved I chose not to serve on them. But if we'd known that we were going to be served with documents about Water Street's unsuitability to HEVs, you can rest assured you'd have had 55 pages of our traffic management plan, which has been fully circulated to all of the safety advisory group, actually, I think more than a year ago. And then Cone Masters locally, who are a local business involved in traffic management. We've used them as well, and they were involved in delivery last year.
Last question, probably hypothetical, but why didn't you act? You were told, you were sent photographs. Why didn't you act? If it was me on a construction site, we have what's called stopped. So that activity would be stopped there and then until we could address it. The utmost respect, you've done nothing. So why is it I'm sat here now? And let's be honest, there should be mutual trust between both parties here now. Why is it that I should believe you and trust you that it's not going to happen? I know you can't eliminate all aspects of it, but you've proven to me that you've failed. I now trust you.
Whether you trust us or not, it's a matter for you, Mr. Morris. Committee have got to make a licensing committee decision, not respectfully you. We delivered. We turned up, we went down there with SIA, we were engaged on your own evidence in a WhatsApp dialogue with the primary organizer of the entire event, was involved in a personal WhatsApp dialogue with you personally during the course of the event. I'm really sorry, but it may not be perfect and it may not be to your satisfaction. Candidly, it may not be your satisfaction ever. But the idea that we didn't do anything, that's just simply not right.
I just respond to that, Mr. Phipps.
It was a question of me. That's my answer.
Okay, well, my response is...
Question.
Okay.
Questions. You can ask a question, but there are no statements or responses. It's just a question.
Why did you come and see me?
Straight answer is I don't know. We were engaged in the WhatsApp group. We went down there to have a look. I don't know the answer is the only straight answer to you.
I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, Ollie.
Because I'm running a massive festival and you're engaged with the organizer.
Can you press the mic? Sorry.
Yeah, because I'm trying to run the whole festival internally as well as externally. So it's a big job, as you can imagine. And I thought that our engagement was really positive. I think we were WhatsApping quite late into the evening, so I didn't want to, disturb you that late. But I'm happy to engage and, really want to work with you to work out how we do compromise.
Mr. Powell, I can see you've got your hand raised.
Hello. Hello. Yes. Just one question. Well, one quick statement. I'm also in favour of the festival, by the way. It's not a witch hunt or anything here. Why under general point number 34? Why is it 8 event days being applied for rather than the 4 or 5, which is actually it's over then? That's just a general question.
I mean, the answer to this, I presume that's a question of me, but the answer to that is that mirrors the existing license is the straight answer, and that we effectively tried to do a license application that was as close to the existing one as possible. If the question is, well, why did you apply for 8 in the first place? Because candidly, all licenses seek a bit of headroom is probably the right answer. But bearing in mind the volume of conditions that oblige us to have dialogue, discussion, and frankly, formal agreement for any events permitted on site from safety advisory, it hasn't been something that we've looked at exploring. So mirroring is the short but correct answer.
And that's fine. Then there's no there's no appetite to increase the length of the festival in future, or have a separate festival in future.
No, I mean, I think, to be straight with you, Mr. Powell, licensing solicitors should never say never, because things change. But I can say the straight answer today is no. There is nothing about any of the discussions that we've had or the dialogue that we've had that suggests that there's a secondary event or secondary days to increase or anything of that nature. I can say that right now. In 10 years' time, that's 10 years' time, but no.
Yeah, no,
The straight answer is no.
You guys have been quite straight with us residents. I've been more than happy. I know Mr. Morris must have had a few more dialogue, and I got no issues with what you're saying there, Mr. Fair. That's it, really. I was a bit, when you're talking about the SIA monitoring outside the streets there, I agree with Mr. Morris. Sporadic would be the answer there. We've had it previously. We've had a guy there, perhaps on the Thursday, and not there on the rest of the festival, and again for a couple of hours, and then gone again. So if that can be part of the licensing, that would be perfect. That would be helpful for us.
So I can help with that, Mr. Powell. So that's so we've directed resource down there without it being a condition, as it seemed to us that it was something appropriate. We've engaged formally with the licensing service and with Mr. Malou, the licensing officer, who's asked for a formal condition to attach to the license that there will be dedicated, in its simplest form, 24-hour resource in and or around the estate throughout the duration of the year. I mean, I can read, I'll not read you the specific wording, but it is set out in the papers, and that will become a formal condition if the committee are minded to grant the license. So we'll be legally obliged to deliver it, and if we don't deliver it, it's a criminal offence.
And we muchly appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's the end of my questions. Thank you very much.
Great. We'll move on now then to the subcommittee members. So any questions?
I do have.
Yeah, Councillor Paterson.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for everybody's contribution so far. With regards to safety of women and girls, it is very high on everybody's agenda at the moment. Will these staff that you employ, would they be able to recognise the hand signals that tend to be all over social media at the moment? When anybody is in trouble, they don't have to speak, but they can just make a hand gesture.
Forgive me, everyone's leaning in, but
Sorry,
I can
way off what we were.
No. I can give you a pretty straightforward question. I mean, the simple answer is yes, in its simplest form. But let me just give you a little bit on that. Bar staff, welfare staff, medical staff, SIA, senior management staff are all trained. Some very formally going back numbers of years. Some of the temporary staff have forms to fill in on arrival, and we'll have a debrief from the bar's manager, might be for example, about Challenge 25. But things like Ask Angela, which is the sort of thing that you're referring to, are very much part of the way in which we deliver the events. And the events industry, actually, I probably should say, but we're not talking about the events industry. We're talking about this event, and forgive me. Yeah, violence against women and girls training is a specific part of that. Yeah. That's that is very much part of our protocols and procedures. And I should say, I mean, it's a modest point, but you've got the answer to the question. And nobody has suggested that we've done anything other than a good job on this. There are points that Mr. Morris made. We have a back and forth, of course, but he makes some, good points about the unofficial PUDO and the state of the road outside his house, and fair that you consider that. But just to be clear, in terms of that sort of thing, nobody has suggested we've got any issues or concerns about the way in which. I just say you've heard it from me.
I wasn't either. I wasn't going down that road, but I know that it's so high on people's agenda at the moment. It would be remiss of me not to specifically ask the question.
As it should be.
I'm grateful for hearing the response. Thank you.
Any further questions from members? Councillor Henton.
No, I don't know. I was going to have one for Mr. Powell. However, he's answered my question already in his own response.
Okay, and then lastly, we'll move on to the legal advisor, please.
All my questions have already been answered, Chair. Thank you.
Great. So before we move on to summaries then, can I just check that there are no further submissions or any further questions from anyone present? No. So thank you. There will now be an opportunity for the relevant parties to make a closing statement. The closing statement must not, and I repeat, must not introduce any new information, nor will there be any further opportunities for questions. If I could proceed in the following order. So first of all, any summaries from the residents? So, Mr. Morris, would you like to go first?
Yeah, again, I'll repeat myself that I'm open to sharing best practice, sharing ideas, come to an understanding. I mean, let's be honest, we have to work together. And Mr. Powell and myself are not here to say no. We've made it very clear from the start that we think it's it benefits the area, but it cannot be a commercial entity that benefits people at the detriment of the people who own the houses. I do not want to have people abusing me and my property and everything that goes with it. So I'm here technically with another olive branch, made several, whatever I can do to help. I've been in an industry that we deal with far greater traffic management than what you have within an event. All I'm asking for is common sense to prevail. I do not want to come back here next year if somebody has been hurt. It's the last thing I want.
Thank you, diolch yn fawr. Mr. Powell, anything from you as a summary?
Yes, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Morris. Yeah, I also see the same there. I do hope this is a future success as well. It's been a fantastic event for Neath Port Talbot, and it's actually put us on the map, I believe. I'm very similar to Mr. Morris. I work in the construction industry around the UK, and actually it's very well received when I mention that I live next to the Knit Together festival. So actually it's very well supported. What I would suggest, if the organisers of Knit Together wish to speak to me or Mr. Morris outside or wish to contact, I'm more than welcome to have further conversations and help them with any issues they think with residents. And again, an olive branch is there to make sure that it runs smoothly for all parties.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. And now over to the applicant.
Thank you very much. I'll just waffle on for a couple of minutes. Ambiguity and transparency, first of all. We just don't accept that that's a fair criticism of either this application or this applicant in this event. You've got the commentary about safety advisory, about pre-application consultation. You've got the notices throughout the two neighbouring estates going way over and above the legal obligations in terms of notification to residents. You've got the paperwork in for 10 days. You've got various subgroups and so forth. You can hear the parts about WhatsApp groups and so on and so forth. Just to be clear, that's not a fair criticism. And you don't need to take my word for it. You can take the police on page 27 of your papers and your senior legal regulatory officer on page 34 of your papers that clearly set out that we have been engaged in an open and transparent dialogue from the very outset of this proposal and throughout the organising of the events in recent years. The second point is this. I'm not challenging the fact that the area outside Mr. Morris's house on the road was less than satisfactory. I'm just not. I really thought that I'd made that clear from the outset, but I'm not, if you will, accepting that the organisers are in some way that this is a window into the soul of the organisation. Look, they cocked this up, and therefore you should presume that the rest of the operation is in some way failing. They were, they had their own pick up and drop off. They had their own exit plan. They had their own egress plan. They had their traffic management plan, and this restaurant car park became an informal pick-up and drop-off point, primarily for taxis, no doubt to speed access away, because if you could get 5 journeys in instead of 4, you get an extra 20% on your meter that night. We need to manage that better. Absolutely no challenge to that at all. We need to look at the resource, we need to look at marshals, we need to look at signage. We're already engaged in a discussion with the residents. It's on everybody's radar. There's no shirking of the responsibility for that, and all those points are fairly made, and that'll undoubtedly be done within the Safety Advisory Group dialogue. The point about the security, I hope is fairly self-evident from the conditions as to what's being requested. There'll have to be security in the estate that's in immediate proximity to the event site through the duration of the event. Mr. Morris makes a fair point, and we need to make sure that we've got facilities for them. I mean, I genuinely was unaware of the issue with them using Mr. Morris's house to, forgive the language, have a pee. But we need to sort that out. I mean, that's not a licence condition, but, you know, I'm not, the fact that Mr. Morris has got legitimate points to raise are fairly made. And that really leads to perhaps his most fundamental point, that he'd like a better dialogue and an engagement with us. And it's a point that Mr. Powell echoed. And that's a point that I can accept entirely. And the setting up of a stakeholder local resident group, and we get email together or WhatsApp or whatever it is, there's no resistance to that at all. And that's something that we can pick up and take on. But, and I say this every time a solicitor says respectfully, of course, you know he's about to be rude, but I say this respectfully, Mr. Morris, but to be straight with you, you do appear, and it's important for, if I may say, committee to remember, you appear here today as a resident, an interested party, and other person, as you're very technically known within the legislation, not as a traffic management consultant. And so the points you make are good points. I'm not challenging the legitimacy of the points. I get the points, but we are engaged in a dialogue with you as a resident rather than as the traffic management consultant that we engage with, or the highways and traffic management consultants that the authority in South Wales Police engage with, all of whom, as far as I can see, as far as the committee can see, as far as the papers set out, have all signed off and approved all of our proposals and our plans. And it does not mean that your experience is not valuable. Happy to hear it, of course, but the formal experts in this forum are all signed off and agreed on everything that we're proposing, and we need to respectfully remember that. The other point is this, and I'm bound to finish with this point, which I hope is said in the spirit of a little bit of dialogue after a robust hearing. Everybody's in favour of this event. The two objectors who have attended to present their concerns to the licensing committee both have gone out of their way to tell you that they are in favour. And sorry, Mr. Powell, to pick up on these points. Mr. Powell told you it's a fantastic event. It's put Neath and put Talbot on the map. It's very well received. So one of our two primary objectors told you that. Well, it's been a while since I've done a hearing where the two primary objectors are saying it's a fantastic event. Long may it continue. Do we need to smooth off some rough edges? Yes. Are the points, a number of them that Mr. Morris has made, to be taken away and reflected upon by us? Yes. Does that change the decision of the committee that we are inviting you to make to grant this application in full? Absolutely not. And you do that in the full knowledge that, bluntly, if we don't do it satisfactorily, we'll be back in front of you with some explaining required. So I'd invite you to grant it.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move on now to agenda item 4, which is urgent items. You'll be happy to hear I have none. So thank you all very much. The committee will now retire for deliberations. Only members, the legal officer and democratic services officer will remain. So diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you all for attending, and you will be notified of the outcome in due course. Diolch.